In a dry corner of Spain lives a nobleman past 50 named Alonso Quijano. He reads chivalric romances day and night until he can no longer tell fiction from reality. One morning he rises, puts on a suit of rusty armor inherited from his grandfather, mounts his scrawny horse, and gives himself a new name, Don Quixote de la Mancha. His mission is grand, to right the wrongs of the world and restore the forgotten virtue of knighthood. But the giants he sees are windmills. The princesses he rescues are peasant women. So, is a man who chooses to live inside his own imagination simply a fool, or is there a kind of courage in that choice? For more than 4 centuries, readers have answered that question differently. Here is the story. First, the author. Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra was born in Spain in 1547. As a young man, he became a soldier and fought at the Battle of Lepanto, where he took a wound that left his left hand permanently disabled. For the rest of his life, he was known, half proudly, as the one-armed man of Lepanto. But the real disaster came afterward. Sailing home from Italy, his ship was captured by corsairs, and Cervantes spent 5 years as a captive in Algiers.
Hengiş'te birden fazla kez kaçmayı denedi, her seferinde yakalandı ve somehow idam edilmedi. Nihayetinde fidye ödenip kurtulduğunda 40 yaşlarındaydı. Ne bir parası ne de bir ünü kalmıştı. Yıllarca ortalama işlerde çalıştı. Hatta bir dönem vergi toplayıcılığı bile yaptı ki bu iş bir noktada hapse bile mal oldu. Geleneğe göre Don Quixote'un ilk sayfaları o yoksulluk yıllarında şekillenmeye başlamış ve sanıyorum ki La Mancha bölgesinde. Cervantes yazıya sonradan başlamış ve gerçekten zor bir hayatın ardından başlamış. Romanın ilk bölümü 1605'te yayınlandı ve Cervantes'i dünya çapında ünlü kıldı. Aslında çok para kazanamadı çünkü royalty sistemi bugünkü gibi çalışmıyordu. 10 sene sonra 1615'te ikinci bölümü yayımladı. Cervantes ertesi sene öldü, 1616'da. İlginç bir koinsidans olarak İngiliz yazar William Shakespeare de o civarda hayatını kaybetti. Cervantes'in yaşam serüvenindeki yükselişler ve düşüşler kitabında tamamıyla yansıtılır. Çünkü yüksek bir ideal ve harş bir gerçekliğin çarpışması Don Quixote'un başa dönerken incelediği temel konudur. Ve çoğu yazar bu çarpışmayı ondan daha fazla yaşamadı. Peki kitapta ne olur? Kitabın merkezinde ise Alonso Quijano vardır. Ama biz onu sadece Don Quixote olarak tanırız. Öyle çok şövalyelik kitabı okumuş ki zihni artık o dünyada yaşamaya başlamıştır. Kendine bir şövalye olarak tanımlar ve yanındaki sade bir çiftçi olan Sancho Panza'yı oğlu olarak yanında görevlendirmeye çağırır. Sancho'ya büyük vaatlerde bulunur. Bir adanın valiliğine vaat eder. Sancho bunu düşünceye değer bulur ve kitabın kahramanının yanı başında yolculuğa koyulur. İkili yola çıkarlar. Biri kemik yığını bir hayvan, diğeri ise dankakla başlar.
Their first great adventure is unforgettable. Seeing windmills in the distance, Don Quixote mistakes them for giants, lowers his lance, and charges. He ends up caught on one of the sails and dragged along the ground. That scene captures the spirit of the whole book. In Don Quixote's eyes, the world is as grand and meaningful as it is in the books of chivalry. But the real world is made of dusty roads, innkeepers, and ordinary peasants. Even his beloved Dulcinea del Toboso is in truth a farm girl from a neighboring village whom he has never actually met. In his imagination, he transforms her into a princess. Throughout the novel, the pair mistake innkeepers for lords of castles, flocks of sheep for armies, and a barber's basin for a legendary helmet. Each time, Don Quixote is beaten and mocked, and each time he refuses to give up. Sancho, by contrast, is entirely down to earth. He worries about his hunger and his exhaustion, but slowly develops real loyalty and affection toward his master. Over time, an odd exchange takes place between them. Don Quixote's idealism softens a little under Sancho's common sense, while Sancho's peasant logic absorbs something of his master's imagination. By the later chapters, the two men have begun to resemble each other, as if Cervantes were telling us that every person carries both a pair of feet planted on the ground and a face turned toward the sky. The first part of the novel moves through adventures like these, and ends with Don Quixote carried home defeated and ill. Written 10 years later, the second part is a far bolder piece of writing. This time, Don Quixote and Sancho learn that the first part has been published as a book and that they themselves have become famous. The people they meet now recognize them from the book and set traps to test them or mock them. Fiction and reality fold into each other, since Don Quixote is now both the hero of his own story and its reader. As the novel continues, there are sweet and surprising moments too, such as Sancho unexpectedly being granted a temporary governorship after all. But the central question never goes away. Is Don Quixote wrong to see the world the way he does, or is the world wrong for not being the way he sees it? I will not tell you what happens in the final pages, because Cervantes built a quiet, profound scene for this ending that deserves to be heard in his own words. What has kept Don Quixote alive for more than 400 years is exactly this double vision. Cervantes wrote it first to make readers laugh, and for generations it was read chiefly as comedy. But over time, people began to see something else in it, the story of a man willing to be mocked for the sake of his own ideals. Today the word Quixotic still describes an attitude that is unrealistic, but noble.
The novel is also considered one of the first great works of fiction to think about fiction itself, since books appear inside the book, and authorship and readership are constantly questioned. That is why so many critics call Don Quixote the starting point of the modern novel. Techniques we now take for granted, an unreliable narrator, stories nested inside other stories, a blurred line between the real and the invented, all appear here, centuries before most novelists pick them up. In 2002, a survey of authors from 55 countries voted it the greatest work of fiction ever written. Perhaps the real reason is simpler. There is a little Don Quixote in all of us, someone who wants to see the world as slightly more beautiful than it actually is. A few surprising facts remain. Of the first printing's 400 copies sent across the ocean, some sank near Havana, though much of the shipment still reached cities like Lima and Cusco.
While Cervantes was still finishing the second part, something strange happened. Someone whose identity has never been fully settled published a fake sequel under a false name. Cervantes was furious enough that he wrote the fraud directly into his own second part, having his characters criticize the impostor's book. Today, Don Quixote is counted among the most translated books in the world, with more than 500 million copies believed to be in print. One more thing is worth noting. The text you are about to hear descends from a long chain of translation, from the original Spanish into English, a tradition that began in the 17th century and now includes more than 30 different English translations, each one wrestling anew with Cervantes' wordplay and his mocking send-up of chivalric language, which is why readers in different languages sometimes feel they are reading slightly different books. We have covered Don Quixote, the story of a man who charged at windmills to keep from losing his own dream. If you would like to listen to the complete book as an audiobook, you will find the link in the description. Subscribe for more books in this series. Until the next one, remember what Don Quixote himself might say. Madness may simply be a matter of what you choose to look at, and sometimes the sanest person is the one who insists on seeing the world as it ought to be.